Wherever you are in the USA, wherever you are on planet Earth, welcome again to the Paul McGUIRE Report. I'm Paul McGUIRE. We're going to continue to take a deep dive and exploration, not for titillation, not for merely satisfying one's prurient curiosity, but we're going to continue to take a deep dive regarding the true nature of the world, the society that we live in. There are two choices we can make right now in history and in the history of mankind and in the history of America. There's two choices. One choice is we continue to believe the illusions that are being sold to us. We continue to believe the masquerade game. We continue to believe the lying system. And that's what most people do because it's too disconcerting for them to deal with real reality, or as Dr. Francis Schaeffer said, final reality. The other choice we can make is we can, even though it may be initially difficult, initially challenging, the other choice we can make is to see through the illusion, to see through the lies, to be able to discern the difference between the lie and the illusion. And if we make the latter choice, then we go on the fast track to freedom, the fast track to personal freedom, and then the fast track to societal freedom, beginning with family, community, people you know at church, etc., etc. As more and more of those people become awake, and that is the operative word, by the way. When we're talking about a great awakening, we're not talking about some extra-worldly, super spiritual, ultra-mystical experience. A great awakening is not a mystical experience. A mystical experience that presents itself as a counterfeit, or presents itself, I should say more accurately, a great awakening which presents itself as a mystical awakening is really a counterfeit of an authentic biblical great awakening. It's not that the Bible is against emotions. There's a lot of criticizers, people who dissect other people's ministries, people who are self-proclaimed champions of biblical truth. And they make us a serious error on a regular basis. That is, and they would never admit this, and I don't think they're fully aware of it, but they certainly wouldn't admit it. These so-called self-appointed champions of the truth are constantly saying that a Christian experience or a Christian movement in which there are powerful emotions being expressed that are not in the box of norm or normal, that automatically, because people are experiencing these incredibly intense emotions, that means people who experience intense emotions must be swept up in the great apostasy or some kind of, New Age religious experience. That is not true, that's not definitive, and it's not precise. Intense emotions do not qualify or disqualify a person or a group of people from having received a genuine move of the Holy Spirit of God. If you look at the book of Acts, which should be our premier example of what happens when ordinary men, the disciples, were meeting in the upper room, and as they were tarrying on God, waiting on God in prayer, on the day of Pentecost, God poured out the Holy Spirit upon his early disciples with great power, signs, and wonders. Now, when you read the text, you discover that the experiences of these disciples when they were clothed with power from on high, which is why I named one of my most important books, is entitled Power from on High. When the early disciples were clothed with power from on high, the dunamis, the dynamite power, the dynamite explosive power of God, they operated in an intense emotional state, that was out of the paradigm of the traditional norm or normal. That's why in popular culture, you now hear, and I think it's a good thing that this word is being used, by the way. You may think, well, that's very antagonistic of you. No, we're in a spiritual battle. Spiritual battle means you have to be fighting a spiritual battle with weapons like the sword of truth, not in a physically violent way, but in a spiritually powerful way. So this term, normies, is simply a weaponized term, a weaponized word invented to describe millions of people, millions of Christians too, in America, millions of people of all ages in America, who are literally addicted. They're chained to, they're in bondage to this, whatever is normal in their minds, whatever they perceive to be normal in their minds, that means the only thing that has validity, the only thing that could really be true are those things which fit in the box of what we call normal. Even though what we call normal may be psychopathic, it may be dysfunctional, it may be horribly destructive, but the fact that most people are doing things that way, it's called normal, and we have hundreds of millions of people in America and around the world who are addicted to normal, especially in the Christian church, and it's pathetic. God never said that he only works in whatever mankind believes is normal. So a derogatory word, a word of mockery to describe these people, and it's not cruelty, it's fighting back with intellectual weapons. So the term normie has been created by somebody somewhere in social media, and a normie is a derogatory term to describe somebody who is pathetically addicted to normal and cannot grow, cannot awaken, cannot become more than they currently are. They're stuck. These people that are stuck in the twilight zone of mediocrity are referred to as normies. And it's intentionally a dismissive, derogatory word. But you got to remember, in the cultural war that we're in, especially with social media, these words have to be created because these words function as non-violent weapons designed to wake people up out of their trance state. Okay? So the word normie is a way of combating words like, oh, you must be a conspiracy theorist because you believe this, and that's a conspiracy theory. And there are so many people, usually normies, who are addicted to mediocrity, and they're addicted to whatever they perceive normal to be. The normies are especially vulnerable to being controlled due to an inordinate fear of being labeled a conspiracy theorist. You see, for some people, because they're so weak in their personal identity, they're so insecure when it comes to their core or personal identity that they literally spend their lives living in terror. No, I'm not exaggerating. There are people that you know that spend their lives in terror, in total terror of being viewed upon by the people that they look up to, whether they know them personally or not. They live in constant terror of being labeled, for example, a conspiracy theorist. I mean, God forbid that they should depart from the hive mind and wake up and smell the coffee. So they live in terror of being labeled terms like a conspiracy theorist. And so the people who control behavior and thinking on planet Earth at the very high level tiers, they understand this psychological dynamic, this overwhelming desire to belong to a groupthink. It's not rational. It's activated by a subconscious mechanism. And so when you use the word normie, what you're doing is you're breaking the chains that are binding them. Because you see, what you're doing when you label these people as normies, or when they read about, wow, there's a trend going on all over the place, and this new word normie is being used. And then they say to themselves, quote, I wonder if people think I'm a normie because, you know, I always take the middle ground. I wonder if people think I'm a normie. And they're so terrified, they're so petrified about what people think of them that they are tempted to reject any behavior or reject anything that would cause them to be labeled as, God forbid, a conspiracy theorist, even if the conspiracy theory is 100% true. They don't care about truth or not. They want to know, which way is the crowd going? Which way are my heroes going, like celebrity athletes and movie stars and pop stars and country singers and whoever they admire and worship? They want to be perceived as somebody in the in group. So they're going to dress like those people, act like those people, talk like those people, believe like those people, and so on and so on and so on. What do you think the purpose of the celebrity in American culture, in the global culture, is really all about? What do you think the purpose of a celebrity is? Remember, modern public relations, modern advertising really took off in the early 1920s. I write about this entire development in my book, A Prophecy of the Future of America, Volume 1 and 2, and The Greatest Battle for the Hearts and Minds of Mankind in the History of the World. There were two advertising PR geniuses at that time, and they developed this principle that works. It's a genius principle. And the principle is they understood correctly by observing behavior patterns of the American public that the average Joe, the average Susie, or whatever you want to call them, will act a certain way, dress a certain way, speak a certain way, have certain behaviors, certain political beliefs, certain social customs, and all of these things that make up what they do with their lives, with the thoughts that they think, are always, according to these advertising PR geniuses, they're always built upon what the elite class is doing. So the average man or woman in America to this very day, it may be largely subconscious, they may not even be aware to what extent they're doing this. But the average man and woman today in America, and mainly around the world also, is obsessed. Yes, that's right. They are obsessed about what this movie star thinks, believes, dresses, the political opinions, the social opinions, the behaviors they demonstrate. And so they devour information and news about what a famous pop singer, male or female, believes, a famous rock and roll star, a famous country singer, a famous celebrity athlete, a famous politician or the politician's wife or the female politician, a famous wealthy person. Whoever they think are the really cool people, whoever they believe the movers and shakers are, they want to emulate them. They want to be just like them in every thought, word, deed, behavior, dress, language, etc., etc. That is the ground zero secret of how to control people on a multiplicity of levels. And I expose it for you in fast-moving terms, understandable terms. I don't write boring books, so that you can use it in your personal life and you can teach yourself and those that you love how to be not affected by this nonsense. And that's exactly what it is. It's psychological manipulation. And these American PR advertising geniuses, two of them, were so savvy, they were so cutting edge and successful in what they did and what they produced, that Hitler's top military generals among the Nazis and Hitler's top Nazi mind control scientists began to adapt the principles of these American advertising geniuses, and they used it as a mind control propaganda to control not only the Nazis in Germany, but to control other nations all across the world. In fact, the Hitlerian approach was so successful that Hitler and his scientists took the American system and transformed it into the most effective and diabolical thing that you know of, especially if you listen to the Paul McGUIRE report, which is called MK Ultra scientific mind control. Okay, you're listening to the Paul McGUIRE report, where the truth is not an add-on. On the Paul McGUIRE report, truth is front and center. It's not an afterthought. It's not maybe can we squeeze it in. And not only is truth front and center on the Paul McGUIRE report since the beginning of the Paul McGUIRE report decades ago, but truth has always been our highest priority. And we don't whitewash the truth on the Paul McGUIRE report. We don't, cover it up with glossy cosmetics, because you and I both know that the unvarnished truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth, has to be anchored to what Dr. Francis Schaeffer referred to as final reality, that reality which is final. You get to the bottom line of the universe when you embrace final reality, or what Dr. Francis Schaeffer would call true truth. And you and I know that true truth and final reality ultimately is all wrapped up in the person of the Lord Jesus Christ, who is King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And you and I both know that Jesus Christ said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father but through me." So we have all these newbies who are populating so-called alternative social media. And they manipulate the content of their programs in order to get the biggest numbers. But you know how they manipulate the content of their programs? They compromise. They sell out. How do they compromise and sell out? Well, this is just one among many utilizations they develop. For example, they will talk about truth a lot, They'll talk about telling the truth a lot, but when it comes to really getting down to it and telling the whole truth and nothing but the whole truth, mysteriously, they will sidestep very artistically. They will sidestep anchoring the true truth into the person of the Lord Jesus Christ, who is King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And God forbid they would actually quote God's word as a final documentation of truth, especially God's word when Jesus Christ says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father but through me. Because no discussion of truth is adequate. No discussion of the truth is fully documented. No discussion of the truth has been completed unless we anchor any discussion of truth. It has to be anchored into a person, the third person of the Trinity, the triune God, and the third person of the Trinity. And the whole truth, the only way you can wrap it all up is by quoting the Word of God, which that bothers a lot of people. They don't want to actually quote the Word of God and then acknowledge the fact that Jesus Christ said unequivocally, Jesus Christ said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father but through me. Okay, this is why the Paul McGUIRE report is different. Compare and contrast. That's why we need your help in getting the message out, because our message is not dilution. We're not diluting or whitewashing the message, which is a way of bowing to Baal, by the way. We're not worshiping Baal in order to drive numbers. I would rather live with current numbers than get exaggerated numbers because I sold out. I have no intention of selling out, because if I sell out, well, then what did I bring to the table? Nothing. All right, this is the Paul McGUIRE report. Make sure you go to paulmcguire.us. Do something bold today. Go to paulmcguire.us and, using the mind of Christ, act boldly upon what you believe. And by that I mean boldly go to the paulmcguire.us area on the paulmcguire.us website and boldly make a donation or a contribution that will help empower us to proclaim an undiluted message to as many people as possible. We're going to act boldly one way or the other, because that's what God called us to do. But I ask you, if you believe in what we're doing, then partner with us and boldly make a contribution or donation. Boldly go into the throne room of God and pray intercessory prayers for me, my family, this ministry, and all the people that make this ministry happen behind the scenes. Boldly join us in intercessory prayer, and also help watch our back from bot attacks, algorithm battles, and all the other nonsense. This is the Paul McGUIRE report. Visit paulmcguire.us, and we'll be back in just a moment. You are now listening to the Paul McGUIRE report. This is Paul McGUIRE. Okay, what is going on? Really, what's going on? When you look at all the news information and the disinformation and the propaganda and the social engineering, and one of the biggest ways that you're being played and I'm being played, if we allow ourselves to be played. See, if you have knowledge, knowledge is power, and you can't be played. But every normie is already played. Normies are already played, and normies are always vulnerable to being played over and over and over again. Okay, so I just happened, because I was looking for a quote, and I had in my hand in the studio one of my most popular books, A Prophecy of the Future of America, a very powerful book, along with A Prophecy of the Future of America, Volume 1 and 2. So I'm reading Volume 1, and I happened to notice this, and of course I know all about Zbigniew Brzezinski. Evil man, super genius, diabolical. I mean, if you wanted to do a stereotype of Satan himself, this would be Brzezinski. He's the father, or the grandfather, I'm not sure. I think he's the father of the Brzezinski girl that used to be a host on, what was it, CNBC, cable news network? The Brzezinski girl, I forgot her name. She's the descendant of Zbigniew Brzezinski, one of the most evil men there has ever been to the United States of America. So Zbigniew Brzezinski was the advisor to 5 different U.S. presidents. Why? How did he gain access to 5 different U.S. presidents? Because Zbigniew Brzezinski was a well-connected globalist. And he also was hooked up with Rockefeller. So the Zbigniew Brzezinski Rockefeller connection empowered Brzezinski and Brzezinski became the executive director of the Trilateral Commission, probably one of the most important globalist think tanks and groups in the entire world. I remember standing literally right in front of the Council on Foreign Relations building in Manhattan, like 2 blocks from Central Park. And it's a very elite area, by the way. And the Council on Foreign Relations building is in one of these very elite, these are not modern buildings. They're very stately buildings that were built decades ago. They're very classy and very expensive. So the Council on Foreign Relations deliberately has a very nondescript but powerful building in this exclusive area of Manhattan. So there I am with somebody carrying my camera and audio equipment, and I'm doing an on-the-run, literally on-the-run documentary on the New World Order. And I'm standing there talking into the camera microphone. Right, I'm literally 3 feet from putting my feet on the doormat of the Council on Foreign Relations. And I'm doing one of my monologues about globalism and the global economic structure. Now, the people that are standing around listening to me know exactly what I'm talking about, and they're trying to figure out, what is this guy saying? Not only that, a number of them, because this was back in the days where I was on the Fox News network constantly, and so I was constantly being recognized by people and constantly being recognized by people in the elite circles, especially in Manhattan. They knew my face because my face was looking at them on Fox News all the time. So one of the most powerful men in the world was, I guess he was waiting for his limousine to pick him up. No, I'm not being facetious. He was waiting for his limousine to pick him up. So he was standing in front of the Council on Foreign Relations, and he was like also about 3 feet, 4 feet at max away from me. So he could hear every word that I said, and our eyes locked. And I didn't commute anything of paranoia or anger. I just gave him the look of, well, it's a little mental game I play. You try to be invisible. There's times in life where if you're walking in a potentially hostile territory, your eyes have to generate like there's nobody home. Not in some weird way, like you're a psychopath. You have to put on like a cloak of invisibility. So he looked at me and I looked at him. I knew that he recognized me, and I suppose that he knew that I recognized him. That happens all the time in Hollywood, Los Angeles, Manhattan, because it just does. It happens all the time. And the social custom is you don't usually announce to the other person that you know who they are, no matter how famous they are. You just do what you do. And the same thing, if they recognize who you are, they don't like announce it either. It's an unspoken rule. So he's listening to me. This guy is in charge of the United States at the time he was listening to me, and I was standing in front of the Council on Foreign Relations. This man was in the most powerful financial position for controlling the entire economic system of the United States of America. This man was the secretary in charge of America's economy, the top dog. And his name was a household name. So obviously he knew that I knew who he was, and he obviously recognized me from Fox. But he was listening to me. That's the only reason he was listening to me. Because he sensed from my remarks that I had a slightly, to say the least, I had a slightly different perspective on economics than he had. And I will say the irony here is that for all practical purposes, he looked like a pleasant man. For all practical purposes, he looked like a man of integrity. So I'm not going to take it further than that. I'm not going to promote his career. I'm not going to denigrate his career. I'm just telling you what I was experiencing. So my segment to record with my cameraman holding a relatively large camera at that time, I guess it was a 20-minute segment I recorded about 4 feet away from this powerful head of America's economy. And so I made sure to frame my words in a way that would be understood by him, but in a way that would strategically reach him and not play into preconceptions or not play into some stereotypical presentation, okay? Because I realized that this one-on-one encounter in which one of the most powerful men in America was, there was nobody interrupting him. Back then, people weren't using cell phones all that often. And so he was my captive audience, and there's no malicious tone to the word captive audience. The only thing he could think of would be to listen to me, which he did. So I had his entire 100% attention for about 20 minutes or longer. And so I tried to frame my words in a language style and in a content style that would communicate a more biblical view, a more biblical worldview of economics without using the word biblical worldview, because that would have alienated him and he would have shut down. So I endeavored to communicate effectively so that I might win him. You understand what that's all about? It's all about strategy. It's all about strategy. It's not about making noise. It's about strategy. So I know whether he received what I said, whether he believed what I said. At the very least, I know, because I believe that when we fully understand this principle, that God chose us before the foundation of the world to be here for such a time as this, I believe that that means you and I were chosen by God before the world was created to be in this time zone for a specific purpose and mission. And so when I made it my purpose to shoot a documentary video in Manhattan over a period of about, 14 days, I believe that my steps were ordered by the Lord. At best, I had hoped to stand in front of the Council on Foreign Relations and simply do my, monologue. And at best, I was hoping that security wouldn't grab me by the shoulder and toss me in the bushes or something. That was my hope was not exactly grandiose by any means. It was a very modest hope. And I didn't get away clean, because for those of you that have seen some of that video footage on paulmcguire.us, our special, if you go to the link to our YouTube site, you can see, I think it's the whole raw clip of me standing, or at least one of the clips of me standing in front of the Council on Foreign Relations, giving my monologue. But you'll notice this is not the same area I was standing when I was doing my monologue, and I was literally standing at the doorstep of the Council on Foreign Relations with this powerful leader, as my audience, because that was where we were literally 4 feet apart. But what you will be able to see is the other shot I took from a different angle, where it's kind of a long shot of the Council on Foreign Relations, and I'm standing kind of in the middle of the street. But unfortunately, I miscalculated the ambient audio noises and the insane honking of horns by taxi cab drivers, all speeding down whatever avenue it is. It might have been Fifth Avenue on the Upper East Side. I mean, it doesn't bother me, but the ambient audio does bother some people. But in any case, the guy who was listening, he was 4 feet away. He didn't have any problem hearing me at all. And plus, the way we were positioned was not flush with Fifth Avenue. It was slightly around the corner where the entrance was to the Council on Foreign Relations. And that bending of it being around the corner brought down ambient noise considerably. Okay, so here, but this man that I'm talking to you about is, I believe, a completely different type of man. When you look into this man's eyes, he looks like a genius, but he looks like, I don't know how else to say it. He looks like the devil, for crying out loud. And I'm talking about Zbigniew Brzezinski. So this is what caught my eye. This is what Zbigniew Brzezinski said. Oh, this is interesting. Zbigniew Brzezinski was at one time the director of the Trilateral Commission. So the building I'm standing in and the high up leader listening to me is right literally on the doorstep of the Council on Foreign Relations. And strangely, no security came out. There was no visible security. I'm sure they were there, but they were not making themselves, they didn't make themselves visible. But I just learned something as I reflected back on what I did with the video there. And that is, on the very doormat that I was standing on, a large doormat with the initials of the CFR and the high-powered individual listening to me, years before, perhaps weeks before, who knows, this man that I'm making reference to now, Zbigniew Brzezinski, obviously had to be a regular participant physically inside of the building I was standing outside of, called the Council on Foreign Relations building. And according to my book, which was researched with correct documentation, this guy, Zbigniew Brzezinski, was the executive director of the Council of the Trilateral Commission, and he was also a major participant in the Council on Foreign Relations. Both are Rockefeller organizations. So there I am standing on a doormat, and the people that run the world, yeah, I'm not exaggerating, they meet other places, I'm sure, like their private yachts, multiple estates, and all the rest of that. But again, it's not an accident that I was standing there, because I didn't plan for this to happen that way. I just planned to do a documentary that included the Council on Foreign Relations. So Brzezinski, who is a power player in both these organizations, I'm quoting you from my book, The Words of Zbigniew Brzezinski. Quote, the technocratic era involves the gradual appearance of a more controlled society. Such a society would be dominated by an elite and unrestrained by traditional values. Wow. And I've talked to you about this before. They always speak openly of what they're going to do, but they deliberately frame their words in a very high level of vocabulary, and they speak in a kind of it's to somebody whose critical mind is still working, which would exclude normies. Anybody whose critical mind is still working can understand the embedded contradictions in what these people say and the way they nuance their words. So on one hand, they appear to be totally transparent, and on one hand, they appear to be totally upfront with their secret agendas, but on the other hand, they'll say nuanced things that kind of muffle and disguise their true intentions. It's a weird but effective game that they play. Okay, so when Brzezinski says the technocratic era, what he means is the era that we're in now. The super technological era is right now. That's what Brzezinski was referring to, okay? And then he says that the technological era, that's now, baby, involves the gradual appearance. Well, it's no longer gradual. It's moving forward at lightning speed. What? A more controlled society is moving to form itself with lightning speed, according to Brzezinski. So, Brzezinski says, the technocratic era involves the gradual appearance of a more controlled society, which is code for totalitarian society. Such a society would be dominated. Notice he didn't say led by, coordinated by. He uses gentlemanly but hardcore verbiage. Notice the word is dominated. If you're dominating somebody, you're crushing them, you're controlling them, you're bringing them down. That's why you need to have a superior intellect. And every one of you listening, God has given you a superior intellect from your birth. You just need to practice activating it. And you will be surprised. If you'll take baby steps of obedience, God will make up the difference. Okay, so such a society, the technological society, would be dominated by an elite. And then listen to these words. Unrestrained. In other words, the domination of the Americans, the domination of the people of the earth will be complete. They will be dominated by us, the elite. And we will, this is what he's saying, listen, unrestrained by traditional values. We will not be restrained. We will not be hampered. We will not be blocked. Nobody will interfere with our purpose and intention to dominate everybody under our thumb and whip. Do you understand what he's saying and how the game is playing? Because whether you understand this or not, it has instantaneous ramifications for you right now in your own life, your children's life, your grandchildren, your friends, your coworkers, whatever relationships you have. Everybody you know, including the normies, are going to be brutally affected by this thing. Let me give you just one case in point. We are on the precipice of a revolution of unemployment due to AI, robots, clones, robots, androids, and computers that will replace a vast spectrum of once available jobs. Jobs by the millions in all kinds of categories. Categories you probably wouldn't believe me if I told you. You can be replaced by a AI computer system or robot. Now, notice that he says we're not going to be restrained by traditional values. Unfortunately, if your children have been indoctrinated through public education, they will read those words, but they won't register. They will read those words, but it won't open up to them. Do you understand why it's important for you to do an end run around this stuff? Now, most of you know what he's talking about, but for those of you that don't, I want to just open up his term. The elite will dominate, and the elite, that includes him, by the way, will be unrestrained by traditional values. Restrained means, held in check. And what are the traditional values? Morality, right from wrong, doing good, love thy neighbor as thyself. All the things like compassion and caring and loving others and helping others and altruism and having virtue, all of the things that make our world worth living in and that make society, what remains of society, pleasant, flow directly out of the moral values and biblical values recorded in the Old Testament and the New Testament. In fact, the fountainhead for all values, all especially traditional values, and that's the word he says, traditional values. That means church, that means God, that means repentance, that means the nuclear family. Okay, that's what he's saying. And what he's saying, learn to read what he's saying because he's attacking you. Do you understand that these men are coming out and in their arrogance and pride, they are in an unrestrained fashion dominating you already if you allow them to. And then he ends his little sentence by saying, and we will not be restrained by traditional values, which are biblical values. That means that the elite, he is telling us, don't believe in traditional values. And because they don't believe in traditional values, they believe that they are not controlled by any traditional values. So whatever they want to do, no matter how satanic, no matter how hellish, no matter how cruel, no matter how evil, whatever they propose to do, which is exactly the words that they used in ancient Babylon, whatever they propose to do, they meaning the people of ancient Babylon, it will not be withheld from them, which means whatever they plan to do, they will be able to do because they're functioning in a kind of satanic unity. Okay, so because they don't believe that in any God or right or wrong, they have, in a self-affirmed way, they believe they're free to do anything to anybody at any time. Now, when you open that up and think about it, that is horrible beyond belief. But you will see this line repeated, as I have, and I quote it in my books. It's used by the globalist one world leaders for going back hundreds of years ago. They're all using this exact line or variations of the line that says an elite unrestrained by traditional values. That is exactly what Bertrand Russell, the elite atheist who wrote the book Why I Am Not a Christian in England around the time of C.S. Lewis. And he militantly attacked Christianity. And he militantly proclaimed a evil message with the disclaimer that really, he used the term really high-minded people. That means, the elite. Really high-minded people are not restrained by traditional values, Bertrand Russell said. And they all began to say it. You see, by rejecting traditional values, they believed they were free to do whatever they wanted to do. Now, when you translate that into what was their belief system and what were their actions subsequent to making the declaration that we are not restrained by traditional values, what kind of actions then could we expect to see show up in their lives and their collective life? Well, let me just toss out a few ways this plays out. Just think of the horrendous, hideous abomination, perhaps the ultimate moral crime, which is child and young infant sex trafficking of little boys and girls, as far back as little baby boys and girls, and preteens and teens, sex trafficking. And if you've got a little kid in the room or a young child or you're easily offended, then turn this off for a couple of minutes because I have to tell the truth. I'm sorry. I cannot sit here and whitewash this thing because it won't do anybody any good. So I'm going to count to 10. That's your warning. And I'm going to go on for, 5 minutes or less or 5 minutes or more. Just don't turn it back on full volume if you're concerned about somebody hearing it. So let's do a countdown to 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay. The elite do not consider themselves to be restrained by traditional values. So child sex trafficking is an example of what they do when they're not restrained by traditional values. Now, this is where I was going. Don't think of child sex trafficking through some sanitized window which is softened to make it palatable for people that are easily offended. Look at it for the abomination and hell that it really is. And the only way you can do that is to know to some degree exactly what's happening. Now, I don't intend to be pornographic in my description, but I do intend to at least make some statements that give you the initial focus of what these people are up to. First of all, when we talk about sexually abusing infants, I'm talking about little baby girls and baby boys in their diapers and earlier. You say that's not possible. Well, you know what? It may not be possible for people that have traditional values, But for people that have rejected that decades ago, anything, no matter how evil, is possible. And not only is it possible, all the police reports say, all the reports regarding the crimes of child sex trafficking are telling us that the following behaviors are practiced. So get a grip. When we're talking about abusing, I had a girl. I was teaching a class in Bible prophecy at the King's College and Seminary. And I had a girl who was a professional nurse, and she was also taking my course on prophecy. And she came up to me after the class to share something, which was she shared the fact that she was abused as a young girl. And as she told me her story, it turns out she recalls being abused as a young infant. Well, how can a young infant remember that? Because it was so horrific that even as a young infant, she could recall being molested by a pedophile. She told me the story when she was lying in a crib in her diapers. And, you know, she's really, really young. She's a baby in diapers. And this is how she could recall it. A man came into the room. She could tell by the bassiness in his voice. And the man, and she felt an evil enter the room when this man entered the room. Remember, she's a baby in diapers. And this man, apparently, according to her testimony, this man pulled down her diapers. She was face down as a little baby, face down on the, whatever you call it, the crib. And then the man, how can I say this in the most delicate manner? The man pulled down her diapers and sodomized her. And the pain, because remember, she's a little baby, the pain was like unbelievable and agonizing. And even as a young baby, she could remember this because this was like so traumatic. She was in unbelievable pain. Apparently there was blood. And the man said something, I can't remember what he said to her, but the man said something that was like repulsive. And then the man left the room. Now, I'm not going to go into any more details of that, but this kind of thing happens all the time. That is not the first woman or the first man that has come up to me in my ministry and has told me. I cannot tell you how often, I guess people trust me. I cannot tell you how often a man or a woman has come up to me during my ministry or after a teaching or whatever, and they have told me very similar stories going back to their infancy or their early childhood. And I cannot tell you, I haven't heard one. I have heard probably hundreds of accounts of little boys and girls, infants, babies in their diapers or whatever, and women in their teens or early 20s or sometimes older, not only being raped and drugged, tortured, and I'm not going to go down the list, but unspeakable horrors done to them. So don't think that this evil is not moving through our society, because it is. In fact, I would venture to say, just because of the number of people listening to me talk now in the Paul McGUIRE Report, that there is a considerable percentage of you listening that have been negatively impacted by this kind of rape or abuse. And I apologize if it awakens painful memories, but we've got to get people who are normies, who don't believe this is true. We've got to wake people up while we can to stop it. Okay, so this is you got to remember. Now, I don't think that most of the people who are abused are being abused necessarily by a super elite. I think that there's probably affluent and all classes. But you see, they have a common belief system. They're not restrained by traditional values. And so let me simply say about the child sex trafficking. This is not merely sexual rape. You have to understand that this entire thing involves Satanism in many cases, occultism in many cases. In many cases, it is part and parcel of satanic ritual abuse. In many cases, the sexual perversion aspect of it is just one component of it. Along with the sexual perversion aspect is the desire to hurt, maim, and destroy, and the occult satanic ritual aspect of it. It's a very dark thing. It's dark spiritually beyond belief. So, in addition to that, and this is hard for people to wrap their heads around, but it's true. In addition to that, because the participation in severe pedophilia, satanic pedophilia, is so it's outrageous, but it's also incredibly expensive and dangerous because you're purchasing human bodies. You're purchasing little babies, little girls, little boys, women, men, a variety of age groups. The younger, generally, the better. And what happens is they're abused. And I have difficulty even mouthing these words, by the way, because I want to vomit. What goes hand in hand with this is torture. Torture beyond anything you could think. Torture, maiming, dismembering, cutting up in horrific ways. And then, in many cases, death. Killing, murdering them, disposing of the bodies, and in many cases, in the most perverse and torturous ways. But it's all part of this process. And then you hear reports about movie stars and other people with great wealth and power who, I don't know what the reason is, I can only speculate, and I don't really want to speculate, but they will purchase, like 3 or 4 little boys and girls, or whatever, male or female sex they prefer. And right now I'm thinking of what I've heard reports of famous politicians and famous people. And whatever they do, it involves extreme violence on the babies and little children, extreme bloody torture and violence that is beyond your ability and my ability to even conceive of what is being done to these babies. And then the drinking of human blood, especially going after this substance in human blood known as adrenochrome, which apparently it's alleged that it has longevity, anti-aging properties, and all kinds of properties that make somebody virile, and all these other magical properties are attributed to it. I don't know how much of that is real and biochemical versus how much of that is satanic ritualistic stuff. But the drinking of human blood and vampirism, the eating of human flesh. Now, I could tell you more, but I can't. I must say that I like to believe that I can just handle anything, but if you really want to know the truth, in the core of my being, I find it so disgusting that I can't continue to give you a description. I'll wrap it up. I just can't do it, man. It's just what goes through my head, though, as a final statement is, it's not enough for me to feel deep moral outrage about it. It's my final statement to you is a final statement to myself. It's not enough. It's not enough to satisfy God for you and I to simply have intense, extreme moral outrage for these abominations. That's not enough. We think in some weird way that by expressing total horror and revulsion about what's going on, we think that it gets rid of our guilt. And you might say, well, what do you mean? Well, I'm talking about that when we become aware of this horrific thing that's an epidemic in America and around the world, and it is an epidemic, by the way. This is a global trillion-dollar industry that money laundering with major banks, major financial houses, major governments is all part and parcel of this global sex trafficking thing. But it's not enough for you and I to express total outrage over what's happening. That becomes almost a counterfeit way to get rid of our collective guilt. And I'm not trying to just throw around the guilt or throw guilt on people in a haphazard manner. I'm talking about specific areas and categories of human behavior that can be identified as satanic ritual abuse type of sexual activity, rape, hurting, torturing, mutilating, killing little babies or grown women or whatever. Those are specific aberrant categories. And when we're making public discussion over it and discussing it, we need to be careful to draw very clear boundaries between the horrific abomination type activities that I just described and other activities that you and I might find highly offensive, but are not necessarily illegal, and they're not something that society universally condemns. By that I mean, you can't say, for example, that every person who read the book, Shades of Grey, I can't remember the number, 57 Shades of Grey, I don't know. You know what I'm talking about. That book, that was everywhere. It was on the front aisles of every supermarket, Walmart. Whenever I'd go shopping, that book, 50 Shades of Grey, 57 Shades of Grey, that book was everywhere. Well, I'm not saying, and don't misconstrue what I'm saying, that every person who read that book is guilty of the spectrum of behaviors in child sex trafficking. So the key is to be very precise with our words and not make blanket accusations, because if we make blanket accusations or falsehoods, we lose credibility, and when we lose credibility, we lose our capacity to rescue the very children and women and men and boys that we say we care about. Okay? All right, so another component that is very real and true, this whole MK Ultra formula, which I've been talking about for decades in my book, Scientific Mind Control, a part and parcel of scientific mind control, which was a combination of the scientific efforts of Great Britain, of America, and the people that really drive the MK Ultra program initially were the scientists in Nazi Germany, okay, and in the concentration camps. And MK Ultra mind control is where you use drugs like LSD, you use extreme torture, sleep deprivation. Sometimes you almost kill somebody but allow them to live, because the goal of MK Ultra is to shatter the personality with extreme torture, extreme trauma. Another name for MK Ultra is trauma-based programming. And in trauma-based programming, which is used by a large variety of institutions, especially in military warfare or counter-espionage and all kinds of things. You see, there must be hundreds of movies and TV shows being produced by Hollywood right now that kind of glamorize or soft pedal MK Ultra. MK Ultra is not, quote, sexy. It's not cute. It's horrendous. So with MK Ultra, a little girl, a little baby, a little boy can be horrifically raped, either themselves or be forced to witness horrific rapes and sins that are so they constitute such an abomination, I don't really want to repeat them. MK Ultra shatters the human personality because it's shock. It's the most primal shock a person can experience. And the little children, or the women or men, are exposed to these ultra horrific things, given powerful mind-altering drugs like LSD, sleep deprivation, and then a whole regiment of pain, drugs, and hypnosis activities to shatter their personality. And then, here's the weird thing, in that extreme state, the human personality can be programmed. You can program a boy or a girl to be a sex slave. You can program to be an assassin. You can program them to learn multiple foreign languages or to be an inventor. You can program them to do things that on some levels appear to be positive, but you can also program them to do things that are illegal and immoral, like killing people, assassinations, and so on and so forth. The irony of MK Ultra is that many of the people who were victimized by MK Ultra, those memories are suppressed through MK Ultra. They're hidden. They're buried deep in the subconscious mind. But one of the things that's unusual is that extreme stress, torture, and shattering of the human personality allows trained scientists, if you can call them that, to create superhuman abilities and forms of superhuman performance. So, for example, some of, not all, but some of those people that have gone through super soldier type programming were exposed to unbelievable stress and shock in a variety of forms. But that produced off the charts performance in terms of accuracy with weapons system, physical endurance, physical fighting, mental toughness, the ability to be fluent and write and read in like 9 different languages, the ability to master calculus and advanced mathematics and physics in a short period of time. In other words, they don't know all the reasons why, but when you open up the human personality for programming via MK Ultra in a weird, sick kind of way, you can produce peak performance at levels that normal people could never achieve. And I'm not saying this is true or not, because I don't know what the definitive answer is, but people that have survived this form of MK Ultra programming, they claim that when they went through the process, that it opened up their inner man or woman to activate psychic abilities in the forms of things like remote viewing, astral projection, mental telepathy, and an entire range of what are called psi performance skills. So, none of that, by the way. Those good outcomes in and of themselves do not justify mutilating, torturing, killing, drinking the blood. And I'm not saying that everybody's doing that. There's other ways to induce super stress. But in the darker fields with the darker operators, like the Nazi mind control scientists, there is no excuse whatsoever for taking any person, little baby, infant, or whatever, all who are God's creation, and torturing them and degrading them in unspeakable ways. Also, this process, MK Ultra, creates what are called altars in the human personality. Altars as in an altar that you worship on. And many times people that go through this process have been deliberately embedded so that a demon or demons will come into them at different altars, and that the demons are deliberately invited through the MK Ultra process, which is pain, drugs, hypnosis. So the takeaway is we can't pretend this thing doesn't go around. You know, all the movies that glamorize MK Ultra, like The Bourne Identity, glamorizes MK Ultra, and there's there's hundreds of shows that glamorize MK Ultra. Look, none of that justifies the torturing, the hardcore sexual abuse, the killing, the drinking of blood, and everything else that is part of some MK Ultra rituals. We have to understand that all of this leads us to a particular arrival destiny. And that is, we have to learn that all of this, when you trace the lineage, when you trace the pathway by which these things evolved in society, they all go back originally to dark occult rituals practiced by the Sumerian civilization, Atlantis when it was rebelling, ancient Babylon, the Canaanite tribes and their worship of Baal and Ashtaroth, the female goddess of aberrant sexuality, and Chemosh, the owl god that is worshipped at the Bohemian Grove ceremonies. The Canaanite tribes in Canaan, and many of the Canaanite tribes consisted of men that were the offspring of fallen angels mating with human women. And in the worship of Baal in ancient Canaan, they would sacrifice their babies alive, child sacrifice. They would sacrifice their babies alive for favor, for blessing, for money, for good crops, for health. And so in order to get those things, the worshippers of Baal, and Baal, it comes from the word husband. And even the Jews, when they were backslidden, would worship the gods of the Canaanites. And they would worship Baal by performing human sacrifice, but more importantly, child sacrifice was a feature in their worship. And then Ashtaroth, that was a female goddess of Baal, and she demanded sexual perversion rituals, and sexual perversion rituals mixed with sacrifice. And then Chemosh, an owl deity, much like Baal, that demands human sacrifice. So to this very day, here's the eye-opener, to this very day, in our world, we have secret societies, we have a globalist elite, and very high-level hierarchies of control of men and women who are practitioners of deeply dark satanic teachings. And they perform in their rituals all forms of hideous evil. So this is not some, benign thing, and we need to recognize it for what it is. Okay, we're gonna continue on, and we're gonna dive deeper. The goal is not to scare you. The goal is not to, in some morbid way, titillate you with depictions of perversity. That's not the intention here. The intention is to, as surgically as possible, remove certain elemental truths about a horrific but very powerful trend in America and our world, so that we can engage in spiritual warfare, and so that we can rescue the victims, and so that we become aware of what we, through our apathy, we, through our ignorance, we, through our indifference, and this is the root sin, every single one of us, we have allowed this thing to grow if our allowance consisted of nothing more than not doing anything, not saying anything, or not asking questions when this kind of thing would encroach into our lives without our actually being fully aware of it. If you look at the amount of Hollywood movies, mainstream Hollywood movies that are considered by the majority of people to be acceptable, I'm not talking about, every reference to sex, every sexual feeling, every romantic feeling depicted on television and Hollywood I'm not making a blanket statement saying it's all demonic, it's all satanic ritual stuff. I'm not saying that. What I am saying is if you pay attention and you learn to discern the difference between, I don't know what word to use. You learn to discern the difference between producers, directors, and writers that are merely pandering to people's prurient interests so they can make a buck, and the difference between that and actual promotion of satanic rituals and satanic ideas and satanic beliefs on a covert and beneath the surface level. See, what's happening right now in our world, especially through the music industry, but also Hollywood and episodic stuff, there's all kinds of lyrics, all kinds of books, all kinds of TV, all kinds of film, all kinds of comedians that are seeding the culture. They're seeding your children's minds with ideas that are designed to unfold and lead individuals in the pathways of hyper-perversity and Satanism. Okay, I'm not saying every time somebody gives a French kiss on the screen that, it's Satanism. If you go off the deep end, nobody's going to pay attention to you. You have to be precise. You have to exercise precision in your critique or you will be marginalized. Okay, this is Paul McGuire. You're listening to the Paul McGuire Report. Help us communicate this message far and wide for the purpose of setting free the victims, for crying out loud, and spreading the gospel of Jesus Christ. This is Paul McGuire. Visit paulmcguire.us.